In this lesson, we will introduce some basic knowledge of speech signal. Before studying the techniques of speech processing, we will know what is speech signal and how to observe the speech signal. Speech signal is a one-dimensional, non-stationary signal. The signals are usually processed in digital representation. In the study, we may meet with such kinds of physical quantities. Frequency is the number of occurrences of a repeating event per unit time. The unit of frequency is the hertz. Sampling converts a continuous time signal into a discrete time signal, sequence of real numbers. Sampling rate is the frequency of sampling per unit time. Nyquist sampling rate is the lowest sampling rate that will permit accurate reconstruction of a sampled analog signal. Quantization replaces each sample real number with an approximation from a finite set of discrete values or levels. Quantization precision is the base allocated to each sample, leading to a number of different levels. The more levels a quantizer uses, the lower base quantization noise power is. The digital speech signal can be stored into a file in computer. The formats of the sound files can be different. For example, RAW file is generally PCM format. WAV file has a file header indicating the sound format. MP3 is a compressed file with the audio coding standard. The speech signal can be represented in time domain, frequency domain, and time frequency domain. Short-time FFT is often used to transform the time waveform into frequency spectrum. The speech signal is mainly referred to voice sound by human. It is different from music sound and background noise. Most of the music sounds have plentiful frequency components, while the background noise is interference to the meaningful sound. The speech signal can be analyzed in time domain and frequency domain. The frequency response is generally called spectrum, while the spectrogram can show the time frequency features of the speech sound at the same time with a kind of two-dimensional image. We can observe the speech signal with the software Adobe Audition, which looks like the oscilloscope and the spectrum analyzer. In the software, we can open different kinds of file formats and adjust the sampling rate and the precision of the signal. We can investigate the signal in time and frequency domain, and the spectrogram is a very useful observation method in speech processing. Moreover, we can observe the unvoiced and voiced pitch cycle, formats, syllable, phoneme in Audition software. Here is a speech segment. It contains three kinds of sound: silence, unvoiced, and voiced. Silence is the background signal and has no speech. Unvoiced is noise-like sound and has no vocal cord vibration. Voiced is quasi-periodic speech and has obvious pitches. In many speech processing applications, SUV classification should be carried out firstly to make sure the whole system works better. Here are two pictures showing a syllable in Chinese Ta. The upper one shows the waveform in time domain. It contains two phonemes. The part of unvoiced is T and the part of voiced is A. The features of voiced and unvoiced parts are also different in spectrogram. The short-time spectrum of speech signal can be obtained by short-time FFT of speech segment or speech frame. The figure shows the short-time spectrum of voiced segment containing four formats: F1, F2, F3, and F4, while the harmonic structure in spectrum reflects the pitch period of the voiced sound. Speech format feature is very important in recognizing speech signal. Speech researcher Gunnar Fent defined the formats as the spectral peaks of the sound spectrum PF. Format is just a harmonic of a note that is augmented by a resonance. In speech science and phonetics, however, a format is also sometimes used to mean an acoustic resonance of the human vocal tract. Here is a short video to show how to find formats from the signal spectrum.
So let's start with the spectrum of the A vowel. And what I want to do here is just set up your intuition for what it looks like to change these format settings. So if I told you to find four formats in the spectrum, you'd probably start by saying, well, I know that the first couple harmonics aren't the format, they're too low to be a format frequency, but maybe I could count these four, and if I were to draw a line, I would draw this sort of smoothed over spectrum that shows four peaks in it. And if I told you instead to find three formats, well, then you'd have a difficult situation because those two peaks in the middle would have to be smoothed over. So we can get a sense for how our estimate of the formats would change just based on how many we're looking for. Another factor that comes into play is the frequency range where the formats are to be found. So right now we're looking over a pretty broad range, but suppose I narrowed that range and only looked in this lower frequency range. Now, if I told you to find three formats, it should be pretty clear that you would include that distinction between these two. And if I told you to find four formats, then maybe you'd find another distinction lower down in the spectrum. So what we're finding is, based on the frequency range that we're choosing and how many formats we're looking for, we have some changes on the format tracking. So this is just to drive home the point that changing the frequency range and changing the number of formats really have a big impact on your format tracking.
Formats are often measured as amplitude peaks in the frequency spectrum of the sound, using a spectrogram or a spectrum analyzer. In the figure, spectrogram of American English vowels, I, A, A, shows the formats of F1 and F2. The first two formats are important in determining the quality of vowels. Let's give you an example of using Adobe Audition to observe speech signal. When opening a PCM file, the first step is to select the sampling rate. The second step is to select the data format and quantization precision. After opening the speech file, we can observe the waveform in time domain. We can select one segment in time domain, and the sampling points are also shown in detail. We can open the sub-window to show the frequency analysis of the selected segment. The function of the spectrogram will display a colorful two-dimensional time frequency image in which the deeper color means higher energy. Spectrograms are usually created in one of two ways, approximated as a filter bank that results from a series of bandpass filters, or calculated from the time signal using the Fourier transform. There are two kinds of spectrograms. By simply varying the width of the input window, one could obtain the so-called wideband and narrowband spectrogram. Narrowband spectrogram can clearly display the structure of harmonics and reflect the time-varying process of the fundamental frequency. Wideband spectrogram can clearly display the formant structure and the spectral envelope, which can reflect the fast time-varying process of the frequency spectrum. Here are two figures with the different bandwidth resolution. Wideband spectrogram with a larger band filter, narrowband spectrogram with smaller band filter. There is a short video to show the difference of narrowband and wideband spectrogram in detail.
So it would be futile to try and come up with a global spectral representation for an entire speech utterance. And we need to split the speech into pieces and analyze these pieces in sequence. So here's an example. This is a sentence from a speech corpus that is used in speech analysis algorithms.
There is a lag between thought and act.
So in the time domain, the waveform can be split like this. This part here is there is a lag. This is between thought and act. So here we are in the presence of a portion of speech that is rich in vowels. And here we have single words that have both vowels and consonants. In particular, for instance, look at this. This is act. And so we have A and then C and T, which are noise-like pulses. The speech signal was sampled at 8 kilohertz. And let's try and see what wideband spectrogram can tell us about the structure of this utterance. So if we take an 8 milliseconds analysis window, which gives us frequency bins of 125 Hertz, which is quite wide, we get a plot like this. We cannot see much in terms of frequency resolution, although we start to see some patterns here that will be clearer later. But what we do have is very precise onsets for the consonants. Remember, this is act, and see here you see the beginning of the C, and here you see the beginning of T in this onset of a high energy band in the spectrogram. And the same could be said for the other consonants. If we use a narrowband spectrogram, so we increase the analysis window to 32 milliseconds, then we have a resolution of 31 Hertz. And here we see the harmonic structure of speech. Here the focus is on the vowels, and here you can see that each vowel contains a harmonic structure that depends on the pitch of the vowel, and it will change from speaker to speaker, from male speaker to female speakers. You can also see how in speaking we modulate and change the frequency of the vowels to give a certain intonation to our utterance. So narrowband spectrogram will give us information on the harmonic parts of speech. Wideband spectrogram will give us information on the pulse-like and noise-like consonant sounds in speech.
That's all for this chapter. See you next chapter.